Good evening. We're delighted to have such a great turnout on St. Patrick's Day. And I guess we figure you're all just going to celebrate more later. I'm Bob Johnson, one of the 20 directors of the Enterprise Forum of Central Coast. We've got 24 chapters worldwide, as many of you know from having heard me say this before. We'll be videotaping again tonight, as we have been doing. This is our 9th program. And these programs are broadcast on Channel 21. On your tables you see a schedule, and you can go online to find further dates beyond, I think, the 24th of March. I'd like to recognize our sponsors. Our premium sponsors include Riviera Insurance, Bank of the West, Radius Commercial Real Estate, Nassif Hicks Harris & Company, Certified Public Accountants, Stradling Yelka, Carlson & Routh, Attorneys, Vices LLC, Web Solutions, Pacific Coast Business Times, CIO Communications Solutions, Express Employment and Search. Our supporting sponsors include DuPont Displays, Alma Rosa Winery, Mission Ventures, and NewsHawk. I'd like to introduce our moderator for tonight, Jacques Habra. He's been a director now for a couple of years. This is his 4th program. Earlier programs included funding the web startups and social media networks. Tonight, he's put together a very interesting and I think very popular program. It'll be no exception to the very popular and interesting programs that he did in the past. So, Jacques, it's your show.
Thank you very much, Bob. And I definitely encourage everybody to take a look at your pamphlets. It's got some great information about our organization, completely volunteer-based and sponsors that definitely would like your support. So thank you for that. Well, happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. I'd like to invite our panelists to actually join us up front for starters. Tonight's lineup, I think it's safe to say that Irish eyes are definitely smiling. I think we're in luck. It's a great lineup, great content, very successful entrepreneurs, interesting keynotes, covering really one of the most widely discussed topics in our day and age, and that's mobile devices, and more specifically, the convergence of mobile devices with the physical world around us. It's no surprise that mobile devices are ubiquitous. Everybody here probably has some sort of a mobile device, and I bet most of you have a smartphone, and everyone's got apps that they use on a daily basis. What's still a surprise, though, that there's a handful of apps that are constantly interacting with the physical world around you at all times. And that's what tonight is about. That's what we're going to take a look at. We're going to get a glimpse into the future of this convergence of mobile devices with everything around us, with the physical world, and really how this industry is going to develop and evolve. Our keynote speaker tonight is Mr. Alan Tigeson. He is the co-founder of Metric Ventures, an early-stage venture capital firm, and it's focused on the emerging mobile and gaming sectors. Prior to this, Alan was a managing director in the U.S. Venture and Growth Funds of the Carlyle Group, where he led innovation for Air2Web, Archetype Solutions, Canesta, Indigo Systems, Rhythm New Media, just a long list of folks that were publicly held companies and emerging companies. Alan has held several executive roles with companies such as Wink, Gold Disc, and Everix, and he earned his MSc degree in economics from the University of Copenhagen, his MBA degree from Stanford Graduate School of Business, where he graduated as an R.J. Miller Scholar, and we're really, really excited to have him here from the Bay Area. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Alan Tigeson.
Thanks a lot, Jacques. It's a pleasure to be back in Santa Barbara, where I used to come monthly for the Indigo board meetings. I see a couple of very familiar faces, not only Bob Johnson, who introduced Jacques, who was a fellow investor, but also Jim Knight, who was a senior executive at the company. It was a very successful investment, and actually slightly relevant to what we're talking about today, in that Indigo was developing infrared sensors that, of course, helped companies in a variety of industries measure things in the physical world, although they were not typically web connected. So the topic of my speech today will be about the mobile internet. I'll talk a little bit about connecting sensors to mobile internet applications, but since we have some great examples here, I don't want to steal their thunder. But I think it'll be helpful to lay the groundwork because there's been some fundamental changes in the mobile ecosystem that are helpful to understand as we evaluate these kinds of opportunities. Let's move along here. So just a quick agenda. I'm going to talk a little about the rise of the mobile internet, give you some slides, and I've tried to pull together some facts. From a number of the leading research organizations that measure this emerging market, and hopefully that'll be useful to you. By the way, I will provide copies of these slides electronically to Jacques, which he can distribute to you. I'm sure there'll be some method for doing that, but so you shouldn't feel compelled to have to take notes on every little number that's in there. We'll talk a little about selecting platforms. There's a plethora of them. A little about the business model, which is a very important topic. How do you approach marketing and customer segmentation? And then I think perhaps the most pressing negative issue in mobile applications, which is how do you erect barriers to entry? Talk briefly about connecting to the physical world, about raising money, something that's usually near and dear to entrepreneur hearts and it's kind of related to my business, and then we'll have Q&A once the other presenters have talked. So let's just give a quick overview of the mobile market. It is absolutely huge. There are now 4 billion mobile subscribers in the world. It is far more ubiquitous than any other electronics platform, TV, computer, you name it. Just the subscription revenue in the mobile business exceeds 700 billion. But the most important change in the mobile ecosystem is that we've moved from it being about phones and making phone calls to an application platform, which has moved the basis of competition from phones and service plans to apps and services. As Jacques talked about, the high-end phones can now have downloaded applications, have robust browsers, and that has, in effect, changed the basis of competition. Now, Apple has a huge advantage over other ecosystems because they've built up this giant base of both music as well as interactive applications on their phone, and others are frantically trying to catch up. But what's perhaps not so obvious is that change to the business has a very fundamental application for small companies. Prior to what Apple did, every company that wanted to sell something to you on the mobile phone or provide a service to you on the mobile phone, even if it was free, had to go through a mobile operator to get distribution. They were, in effect, a gatekeeper. And that turned out to be an incredibly difficult sales channel. They did not really feel like they had an incentive to create a robust ecosystem. They would usually take 50 to 70% of gross for the privilege, and it could take years to get through their qualification process, both from an engineering and sales standpoint. So having this change, being able to launch applications directly to consumers and small enterprises at very modest cost on a small number of platforms has fundamentally changed the mobile business from being, frankly, fairly tough and very capital intensive to being significantly easier from a distribution standpoint and much less expensive. This will probably not be a big surprise, but these 6 phones you see here, those are the top 6 phones in unit volume in the US in the fourth quarter of '08. Basically, since that quarter, the top 5 selling phones in the US have been smartphones every quarter. 12 key phones, yeah, you can still get them. They're it's almost giveaways, second phones, et cetera. But the heart of the market is in the smartphone space. And the reason it's so interesting from a growth perspective is that in the US in particular, carriers have offered service plans that essentially offer unlimited access. Technically, Verizon and AT&T will tell you in the small print that you can only surf so much before they'll bill you more. There's a 5 gigabyte limit. But effectively, it's unlimited. That, of course, encourages all of you to use your phones more. That has driven tremendous growth. We have had 300% mobile internet traffic growth every year for 3 years in a row. Now, if you think about the power of compounding, that's more than a 50x increase in mobile internet traffic in the last 3 years. And we've had a significant broadening of penetration. Over 20% of US cell phone subscribers now have unlimited data plans. By the way, Europe, which used to lead the US, that same number is under 4%, because the carriers have been slower in moving to unlimited data plans. So the US has leaped from, frankly, being a laggard in the mobile business to being at the forefront. I'm not going to go over these, but when you look at them in the handout, these are some charts that show the quarterly numbers. These are Nielsen's mobile survey numbers. And as you can see here, mobile internet access is actually almost reaching 50%. The difference between those two numbers are people who have lesser plans that might be metered in some way. So we're approaching 50% of mobile phone subscribers that can access the internet in some way on their phone. The mobile app space, which is probably what a lot of you think about, which is these applications you can download on an iPhone, on an Android phone, on a BlackBerry, appear as icons on your phone, have also significantly increased in penetration. Used to be really a very small subset of users did that, predominantly games, casual games. Now it's a much broader set of applications. You can see here the penetration rate has gone from 5% to 14% in Q2 '09. I just saw the most recent numbers. We're approaching 20% now. So why is mobile so attractive? Well, I think it's attractive for 3 reasons. First, every entrepreneur and every venture capitalist wants to be in a market that is large and rapidly growing. Actually, the rapidly growing part is almost more important, because that's what creates the beachfront property that is pristine and that's available to capture for a young company. If all the spots have already been taken, you need to box a couple of big companies out of the way, life is a lot more difficult for a startup. Second, it's newly capital efficient. So when we were delivering applications, and I've invested in mobile companies for almost 10 years now, so when we were developing applications that were going through Verizon and AT&T and their counterparts overseas, it was not atypical for us to have engineering teams of 100, 150 people. The total capital into those companies would often exceed $50 million. Now, so I'm sure we'll hear, none of these guys have raised $50 million. I don't know if any of them have raised $1 million. Yet they are generally live with applications. And they can start testing the customer proposition with trivial amounts of money. And the third part I've already mentioned, namely that you can distribute directly to customers. You're not subject to a key gatekeeper. I listed some icons of companies down there on the left. Not all of them will be familiar. I suspect many of you have heard of Twitter. Pandora is the streaming music service. Pandora was almost dead until their iPhone app launched. And what's more natural than having music on your phone? This now became a different way of doing that. Instead of having to connect your cable up to your computer and sync your library, you can now stream music. Phenomenally popular, phenomenally successful. Foursquare, probably one of the hottest companies right now, is a mobile social networking company that leverages location. In essence, you broadcast your location and tell other people to come find you. Very popular, as you might imagine, among teenagers and young people. I won't go over all of them, but these are some of the, I think, sort of sexiest companies in the mobile space right now. The smartphone, if you think back of what is a smartphone, typically it's a larger screen, either a full-size QWERTY keyboard or a screen that can substitute for a mechanical keyboard, and a reasonably good data connection that allows for you to engage in browsing and other similar applications. The pioneer in the space was really Handspring with the Trio there. BlackBerry shortly thereafter started adding that kind of capability and could really be called a smartphone as opposed to a dedicated email device. The iPhone was launched in 2007, and the phone there on the top with the 2009 bar is the Nexus One, which is the latest phone with the Google operating system called Android. We'll talk more about that in a second. As you can see, we're now approaching annual volume. This is not compound over time. This is annual volume of 160 million units a year. Why are smartphones so important? Well, from a consumer standpoint, I think it's obvious what all the benefits are, but they're equally important to the carriers, which is why they're pushing them so hard. So if you wonder when you walk into a Verizon or AT&T store why they are desperate to give you an iPhone or an Android phone or a BlackBerry, anything but a plain phone, it's because of this. It's because when you buy one of those phones, you add another subscription on top of your voice and SMS subscription, which is very profitable. Do not believe a word those guys say about how unprofitable it is and you're surfing too much. If you look at the fully burdened cost of
an iPhone user, which is the most data-intensive, most active user out there, most of the guys will say it's somewhere between $8 and $10 per subscriber. Well, they bill you 30. Okay? Now, it's true that they have to do a subsidy on the phone and they have to build out some network infrastructure, but when it's all said and done, it is very, very, very profitable for them to sell you a smartphone. Now, it's not just about phones. A lot of people forget that if you're in the application space, the iPod Touch is almost of the same size as an addressable market as the iPhone. In fact, for certain applications, the usage rate on iPod Touches exceeds that of the iPhone. That's true for a number of games, for example. And I know several of our people here are aware of that. Now, that said, Apple's not the only game in town. It's clearly the cleanest, most homogeneous ecosystem, and while there are lots of vocal complaints about how they control which apps can go on the App Store, generally speaking, it's 100 times better than it's ever been before. That said, I think the most dangerous challenger to Apple is Google. What Google is doing is they've created a very robust mobile operating system that can enable experiences much like what you see on the iPhone, and they give it away. They give it away to the phone manufacturers. Well, not surprisingly, everybody but Apple and the makers of BlackBerry have so basically Apple, RIM, which makes the BlackBerry, and Nokia, which is the world's largest phone manufacturer, have sort of got their own vertical thing where they do everything themselves. Everybody else has licensed Google's Android platform. Yeah, maybe they'll do some Windows stuff and maybe they'll do a few other things, but increasingly, they're doing Android. And as you can see here, this is a measure of mobile ad serving requests from the leading mobile ad network called AdMob. It's in the process of being sold to Google. And as you can see, Android is starting to catch up. Why is that? Well, because when you have the entire ecosystem of developers, of hardware developers out there, you're going to have a very broad range of products. Some are going to have mechanical keyboards, some are not. Some are going to have big screens, some are not. Some are going to have this and that. And that whole, no one phone can compete with the iPhone, but the full assortment of Android phones is starting to compete very effectively with Apple. And so you'll see a lot more of that, regardless of who your carrier is. They're all now offering Android phones. It's a little like the PC versus the Mac, if you will. Right? The Mac's very tightly controlled. It's a really good, clean experience. I carry a Mac laptop, but it's hard to beat the value of an open platform. Now, all that said, I don't want this to become completely US-centric. So in North America, the dominant smartphone platforms are RIM, which is the manufacturer of the BlackBerries, and Apple. And Android is rising, and I think if this chart was updated a little bit, you'll start to see it creep up towards Apple. But if you go in other regions, it's a very different story. You go to Europe, for example, Symbian is a material player that's an operating system controlled by Nokia. And the feature phones, which is an industry term for a robust phone with good capability that's not quite a smartphone, is a larger part of the market. But look at Asia. I don't know if any of you have been to India. In India, Nokia has 82% market share. So, I mean, if your target market is India, you'd be a fool to develop for the iPhone. And by the way, the attractive part about marketing mobile applications in markets like India or the Philippines or China is that's the only computer people have. And as a result, they're much more willing to do a whole range of things that most Americans wouldn't do. Mobile banking, it's been a bit of a bust here in the US, frankly. You keep talking about it every year that it's going to be big next year, but the reality is it hasn't really been, because how often do you really need to check your bank balance or transfer payments? You can do it from a desktop. It's just a little easier doing it there, and most people don't do it. Well, in India, it's the only computer they have, and they're very keen to check their balances, and one of my portfolio companies routes almost 1 trillion SMS messages a month in India for applications like that. Now, let's talk about business models. So, and this is looking at the perspective of having a mobile application that might be available on iTunes, or it might be available on the Android market, it might be available on the BlackBerry market. I think there are really 4 principal business models that you could attack that market with. The one that's most widely used and most widely understood is you put a typically low single-digit dollar price on the application, you charge it one time, it's effectively a perpetual license. Okay? Most of the apps on the Apple App Store are $1, but there are applications that are $5 or $10. It's easy to understand. It's widely supported on every app store. It's a very simple purchase mechanism. And of course, as a developer, you get your money up front. So what's not to like? Well, the problem is that, first of all, the price points, there are so many products available that it's become hard to convince people unless you have a fantastic brand. Let's say Madden Football, pick a video game franchise that Electronic Arts owns. If you're offering the Madden Football for mobile, okay, maybe you can get away with charging $10, and they do. But if you're offering no-name football, the price goes to 0, because there's 10 other guys who can offer no-name football. And for an analogy, right now the average selling price on the Apple App Store is somewhere in the $120 to $140 range, depending on which research you believe. But I think the long-term trend is 0. It's 0 on the web. How many sites do you pay for on the web? Let alone pay for on a per article or per event basis. You don't. This is the web. I think the other thing is that the business model itself, other than building brand, isn't inherently sticky. It doesn't create enough entry barriers, and so over time, people come in and knock you off. Even if you have a wildly successful application, over time it just starts getting eroded. So the next one would be a subscription. I think if you can get that, it's fantastic, right? It's very lucrative. As you probably have seen with all subscriptions that you subscribe to, over time you look at how much you've actually spent on those subscriptions, it's a ridiculous amount of money. It's way more than you've ever been willing to spend up front. I think people just like sort of they're not as susceptible to the drip, drip, drip of a subscription, so if you can get them signed up, you can go on for a long time. Being a little bit more generous to the model, I think it improves alignment of the benefits that are being delivered and the cost to the user. If you're a software user and you're using Salesforce.com, hey, you're getting a benefit every month. It seems like a good idea to charge you every month for that, and if you want to turn off, you can turn off. The problem is, of course, that in mobile, since everybody else is charging next to nothing, it's a pretty high hurdle to get people to sign up for a subscription, and there are a number of app stores that don't even support it yet. So I think it's if you have just the right thing, it's a very compelling model, but it'll apply to a very small subset of companies. Third, you could be free and ad supported. That's obviously the easiest, and there is now a pretty robust third-party ecosystem that basically will sell the ads for you. So if you offer the space, you can sell it, and the better a site you have, and the more traffic you have, and the more branded and targeted it is, the better the rate and split you can get with those networks. I have an investment in such a company, and it's really, this is becoming finally a real business. However, you got to do the math. It takes a lot of traffic to generate meaningful revenues from advertising. Okay? Advertising is a scale business. There are few exceptions. If you're only looking to target dentists, then maybe you can charge a lot to reach those dentists, and maybe if you can get to all the dentists, then that would be really good. But mobile is not at that state of maturity where you have that kind of sort of niche targeting that you might see in the magazine business. Generally, it's pretty mass-oriented, and it's a tough model. Last, I think, is the most intriguing model. It doesn't apply to all businesses, but it's one where you get to use the product for free, and then as you get hooked and value is delivered, you can buy micro items or upgrades in the application. Apple enabled that in their recent release, 3.0. It's most widely used in the game space. So, this is an older audience, but I am sure many of you are on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, you have no doubt received updates from your friends playing Farmville. Farm Bill, as much of a joke as it is, has 85 million registered users, 30 million daily users, and between 5 and 10% of them buy items in the game, and they spend, that company that makes Farm Bill is their biggest product, is now at a $500 million revenue run rate. Okay? Their stock's being traded on private exchanges in Silicon Valley for $4 billion. Okay? So you can laugh all you want, but, you know. And this is a model that originally evolved in Asia, because in Asia, piracy was a huge problem. You could not really protect, you know, a disk or a cartridge. As soon as you shipped it, you know, a week later, there'd be an infinite supply in any market, and the price went to zero. So obviously, disks and cartridges were not a good way of going, and people found a way that the way to charge people subscriptions. People don't have the method of payment. Most people don't have credit cards. The way to get them is let them play for free, get hooked, and then some percentage of them will start buying items and will end up spending way more than they ever would have spent up front. It is not atypical in some of these games for people to spend hundreds of dollars a month. Now, obviously, it's not an application, not an option for many applications, but we're thinking about, you know, can you deliver value and then inside the application upgrade people if you want to open up this module, buy now. You know, I think the key message here is there's enormous value in user trial and in then having snack-sized bites that improve people's experience immediately. If you can deliver that and you can make the purchase process really seamless, you might have something, okay? All right, so now that there's, I think, close to 150,000 applications on the Apple App Store, more than 30,000 in the Android Store, pretty much, you know, 1 of everything, 10 of everything. How do you do it? Well, it's really not too dissimilar, if you step back from it, to the wired internet. I don't expect all of you to be wired internet marketing experts, but just bear with me. I'll show you the analogies here. I mean, the first thing to do on the, here is the cheapest traffic is traffic that's referred to you, that comes without you spending money. The best way of doing that is word of mouth. Best way to generate word of mouth is to find the early adopters. Okay? Whoever that is. This was an old adage in the music business, you know? And you got to find those guys. You got to find the commentators, because a very active early recommender is worth 50x that of a more passive user. So having the metrics to measure which users are referring other users, how often people follow those recommendations, and can you acquire more of the guys that are referring a lot of people, very important. Second, when I say organic search, when you guys look at a Google page, I'm sure everybody here searches on Google, you'll notice, you may not notice, but the results on the left, except for the top result, are what's called organic search or unpaid search. Those are the results of Google's algorithms as to which results you're most likely to want, okay? Based on the past search history and so on. All the other results are paid. They're auctioned off by Google, basically on a per-click basis. Very sophisticated system. They basically auction them off, not just on an absolute price, but on an expected value based on the expected number of clicks multiplied by the price that you're bidding. It's important to understand the marketing side. We'll get to that in a second, but you've got to optimize your mobile application so that you can be found for free. Nothing beats that. Any successful e-commerce company, any successful applications company will have lots of traffic that they get for free, and not just from recommendations. Paid marketing. The beauty of internet and mobile marketing, it's like direct marketing. It's like the catalog business, except the results are instant and it's a lot cheaper. Okay? So all of these programs here can be tested at relatively modest cost, and then the ones that are working, you can dial it up. You got to track how many people click and how many of them convert, and you know, it's a spreadsheet exercise, but it's data. It's not qualitative. God, I wonder who's watching my ad. It's very scientific. Distribution partnerships can be very important. You know, in the Apple world, obviously Apple is very important, but the carriers can be very important. There could be other companies, big content companies that might promote you. That can be a very interesting way of getting distribution. It goes without saying you got to deliver a superior product. This is a hyper-competitive market. Just slapping something together and not working on improving it is, a recipe for failure. Next, very, very, very important is enabling virality. See, I was talking to some of the guys here about this earlier today, and we were meeting. You've got to make it insanely easy for people to recommend products that they like, your product. I mean, that has got to be at the absolute top. That's not a 3.0 feature, that's a 1.0 feature. Okay? If people like your product, you got to make sure they can spread the word to everybody in their email list, everybody on their text list, everybody in their Facebook profile. And because people like doing that. And when they do, I mean, most of you probably listen to the recommendations of your friends more than you listen to anybody else. Well, that's human behavior. And what's so great about these platforms is it becomes so much easier to enable that. We talked about tracking everything. I think that the number one difference between product development in this world and the world that came before it, think of enterprise software, for example, is in the old days, you'd have sales and marketing guys going out, asking customers what they want, and try to then boil all those requirements down to, okay, so this is what we're going to build. You'd try to create the perfect spec, and then you'd give it to engineering, and then they'd build it, and then you'd go market it. Okay? And it was, the more you could create the perfect set of requirements, and the more engineering could code just to those requirements, the more scientific it was, and that was sort of best practice. That's absolutely not the way it works now. The way it works now is you want to get the minimally functional product out there as soon as you can, and then start iterating based on customer feedback. So it's very hard to leave those old habits behind, but it's very, very important because guess what? You're making product change decisions based on what people are actually doing. Not based on what they say they might do, but what they're actually doing. All right, lastly, there are some extra rewards to sort of hypercharges things for people who win. It's widely understood that if you can get into the top sale list, it can be sort of a self-reinforcing event. You can stay there for a little while, and there are a couple ways of trying to do that, where if you can get to that point, that can be very useful. Equally importantly, and less discussed, is people are informed consumers these days. They have access to tens, hundreds, thousands of reviews. The more you can drive good reviews, the more people are going to buy your stuff. Lastly, it is intrinsic to mobile that you're going to have platform proliferation. Everybody wishes there could just be one thing you had to write for. It'd be so much less complicated. But that's a utopia that's not going to exist for a long time, if ever. So I think if you're a mobile applications company or a mobile application company with a hardware component, you probably want to start with the iPhone, except in a few special circumstances. If you're sort of hyper-focused on business users, maybe BlackBerry makes sense. If iPhone won't let you do some of the things that you can do on the Google platform, which is more open, maybe you start there. But I think over time, you better have a rollout plan, at least for the first 3 up there. If your plans are big enough from a geographic standpoint, your business achieves enough scale, then by all means, you should be planning on parallel efforts on some of these other platforms. Very importantly, besides doing applications, you should be doing stuff that can just be accessed through the browser. Okay? If you think about it, it's sort of interesting how mobile today is more application-driven. I think it's partly a navigation issue, right? When you have a mobile phone, it's a little clunkier to enter text, it's harder to search, the screen's not as big, and so on. It's easier just to have shortcuts. In fact, most of the applications that many of the applications people are using on iPhone and other platforms today, they're nothing more than bookmarks. If you think about it, well, why not just take the leap and be a mobile website? Yeah, there are lots of issues with how do you get people to come to your site and how do you get them to remind themselves. You don't get lost on that sea of icons. But I think it makes a lot of sense because the mobile browser is ubiquitous. All these other things you're writing to the native platform. So you're writing separately for iPhone, separately for Android, separately for several kinds of BlackBerries, separately for other things. But the browser, with some testing, you can write once. Pretty compelling. So just a few stats about smartphones. Not a surprise, I think, that smartphones skew heavily to major metro areas. You know, probably won't surprise anybody here that New York, LA, or San Francisco has a lot of iPhone users relative to the general population. In fact, it's so bad that AT&T can't really service all the requests when, during peak times in those three markets. That's not going to go away in the immediate future, but will ultimately get resolved. Here's the thing that I think is more surprising. You might all assume that it's rich, you know, mostly white people that spend a lot of money on phone bills, but it's not. So if you just look at the left-hand chart, the highest grossing ethnicity are African Americans. How interesting. Now, I think this, within the phone bill, the spend pattern is a little different. There's more spending on music and entertainment amongst the African American community. But the point is just, you need to check your biases, you know, at the door, because the data is that minorities are a huge part of the mobile data market. One of the very important stats to track for a mobile application is loyalty or retention. And there's a couple ways of measuring that. As you probably have experienced if you've downloaded something to your phone, a lot of apps, you try them a few times and then they sort of just disappear. I mean, yes, they're still on your phone, but you don't ever use them again. And other applications you use very frequently. This is a pretty interesting chart. Flurry is a mobile analytics company. For those of you that are interested, I think they have some pretty interesting and free reports that are useful. And this sort of shows the loyalty by application category. Not surprisingly, for example, entertainment applications, which are often, you know, iBeer, iFart, you know, would both be in the entertainment category. Not surprisingly, not a lot of retention, not a lot of repeat use. On the other hand, you know, news and reference applications significant. No medical, pretty interesting. How deep the retention is. Not high frequency as you would expect. It's more of a reference application. So it's very important to understand how your application compares. You want to benchmark yourself against other people that are in a similar space. Again, back to the data. You got to track everything because the market is speaking to you. All right, let's talk about barriers to entry. So the good news is you can launch one of these apps for tens, maybe $100,000. That's great. I mean, it used to be, when I was a software entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, you know, you were 5 or 10 millions in before you had, you know, version 0.1. So that's awesome. But everybody can do that. So, you know, it's not a competitive advantage if it's available to everybody. And even worse, while you might be making money and the guy next to you might be trying to make money, there are people who just do this as a hobby. And there are a lot of application categories that get ruined by people who are not in it for money. There's an old adage, you don't want to be in businesses where people are in for reasons other than money. Okay? I think it's one of the reasons why restaurants are generally a terrible business, bars, right? Because people have all kinds of other reasons they want to be in the restaurant and bar business. And it tends to drive margins to the floor. I hope there are not too many restaurateurs here. So what are some sources of entry barriers? I list a bunch of them here, but I think there are only a few of them that potentially apply to your company in the mobile space. The most powerful one, but one that really realistically is not available to a lot of companies, is if you can build a third-party ecosystem. Basically, if you can become a platform. And people start building applications on top of what you've built. I mean, that's game over. That's fantastic. That's what every investor dreams of happening to their company. But for most companies, that's not really realistic. But that's what's happened to Twitter and Facebook. By the way, I think Facebook is rapidly becoming, they're already the second most important company on the internet, and Google has to really watch out. They are, you may have seen there was a news release earlier this week that Facebook is now the #1 site on the web. Total traffic spent, visitors, whatever you measure it. Now, their traffic's not as valuable as Google's because Google's is much more close, in 20% of the cases or so, it's closer to an actual purchase, and that's very monetizable. But Facebook's going to be a juggernaut. Network effects, I think, is the best realistic model. That's one where basically you are building an ecosystem of users where every new user adds to the value of the system, and it becomes harder and harder for other people to catch up. An obvious legacy example from the internet is eBay. The more buyers, the more sellers they added to the system, the harder it was for companies, even as powerful as Yahoo and Amazon at the time, to catch up, and they never really did. In fact, the eBay system now is an anachronism. I mean, it shouldn't exist, but it does, because even the people who will whine about the seller fees on eBay can't afford to leave because that's where a lot of the buyers are. And a lot of the buyers have to look there because it's where a lot of the sellers are. No, it's got a very long tail. But lesser companies have that opportunity, and it's always one of the things I try to explore with companies. Brand can be important, but it's not clear how realistic it is for a startup. I mean, you may think you have a brand, but it takes a lot to get a brand that's widely known, even, let's just say, by the cross-section of people here. Things that typically don't apply to the mobile application space, but that I hear entrepreneurs bring up all the time is, oh, well, we're just going to, we're going to have more scale, or we're going to, get to critical mass before other people do. Unless you have network effects, there's not that many scale economies. In fact, people, now that there are web hosting services where you can buy things you can get stuff hosted by Amazon, the gold standard, for $20 a month. That's available to anybody in this room. It's not as much of a barrier as it used to be. Access to capital. You can say, once we raise money, no. First of all, we've talked about how capital efficient things are, so raising capital is not as much of a barrier to get started. But even getting money after that, the venture industries and other sources of money is very metric driven. If you've got results, you can get money. Distribution channel control, we've talked about it. It's wide open now. It's hard to exercise that. Now, over time, you can build barriers. So, for example, these mobile gaming companies have built huge lists of email addresses of users, and now that's become a little harder to market quite as aggressively via Facebook. They have an advantage, or incumbency advantage over other folks, but not big. And there's very seldom technology or patent barriers in a software business. You might think you have something really unique and hard, but it's usually something that can be solved. Now, hardware businesses are different. So there is nothing, I'm not discouraging you from building a mobile business that doesn't have material entry barriers. Just don't expect it to scale to become really big, and certainly don't expect it to get venture financing. No. Hey, there are companies out there, there are individual entrepreneurs who, on their own, have gotten a single app up. I mean, the guy who did, I think it was iPod, sold like $1.5 million worth of that application before it was knocked off by 20 other people, and he got in a lawsuit with somebody else who launched a very similar app. $1.5 million, that's pretty good. Nothing wrong with that for an app that probably took him a week. But it's not a scalable venture financeable business. Now, let's talk about connecting to the physical world, which is sort of the topic for a lot of these guys here. I think it's a really interesting area. I was at that MIT event that Bob mentioned yesterday up at Stanford, and you'd be amazed at the range of opportunities to connect various sensors to the internet without really humans being involved. Probably the most visible example, I don't know if this has been rolled out here yet, but all the e-meter companies is a perfect example of connecting to the physical world, right? You're connecting to a new smart meter, and you're collecting the data wirelessly over a network, and it's a fantastic application that is already at some scale. I think you'll see a couple of IPOs in that market this year. But there are applications in almost every vertical market for this. So what are some of the challenges? Well, if you're only using what's in the phone or in a wireless modem module, great. Then you're benefiting from the industry cost curve, which is continuing to go like this. However, while there are more and more sensors and measurement things in these phones, a lot of times you need some extra hardware. We'll see a couple examples today. You know, that means you got to sell that hardware. That means you have a smaller served market. That upfront cost barrier of the hardware can reduce the market size. And once you're in the hardware business, you know, most companies that are going in the hardware business are assembling stuff that's made by others. Well, guess what? Other people can do that. And hardware commoditization happens quickly and brutally. Of course, there's inventory and financing risk. So it's a very difficult model. That does not mean it can't succeed. There are people who do it very well, and if you are quick, get distribution ramped quickly, and execute well operationally, you know, it can be quite good. But ultimately, most hardware plays get commoditized. You got to think about, okay, what's your model after that happens? Maybe it even gets embedded in the phone. So I think some of the lessons from looking at the connect to the physical world is, first one would be the adage that I talked about earlier, which is get your minimally acceptable product out there as soon as possible and start testing and start measuring. Because you may think you have a great idea, but you know, the real test is whether other people think so too. Try in every way possible to leverage existing hardware. It's always tempting that the existing hardware is not good enough and we really just want to attach this little thing and it's really cheap. It's only 20 bucks. What's 20 bucks? Well, 20 bucks is the difference between accessing 100% of the market and 3% of the market. It's a huge deal. And then I think the other key issue is sort of what's the maturity of the market that you are attacking. A lot of these opportunities are vertical in nature. Let's say for medical, for example. It's a pretty early stage opportunity. You can't just provide the hardware, for example, which is where a lot of entrepreneurs will go at first, because who's going to deliver the software and sell the whole solution to the doctor's offices? Let's say nobody. And so your really cool hardware and your really cool vision is just that. It's just a vision. So I think a lot of these market opportunities, particularly in the business-to-business space, will be solution sales. And so you got to think about, how do I put together the hardware, the software, and the services to be successful. In some cases, there are opportunities to become a software platform for multiple markets. One example that just comes to mind that I saw yesterday is a company called Jasper Wireless. What Jasper does is there are lots of companies now who want to connect devices to a wireless network that are, they're only going to talk to the network very infrequently, maybe once a day. Maybe it's a vending machine calling back and saying, I'm out of Coke. Okay? That's not exactly a high data throughput thing. Well, the carriers are not set up to deal with little wireless modems dialing back once a day. You don't have a billing mechanism that works for that. And so Jasper recognized that and created an aggregation platform and our service provider to lots of vertical industries that need to use the wireless network, but not in the way that they were primarily designed, which is for voice and SMS. And then, of course, there's some disruptive hardware solutions, and we'll talk a little about a couple that might have that potential today. All right, lastly, I just want to point out that people are often myopic about their business model. I want to cite Apple because it's such a familiar example, but if you think about what Apple did in the music business, everybody always talks about the iPod and iTunes and the symbiotic relationship, and I think most people have either used it or at least seen it, and it's a great solution. But it wasn't just that they created a great connected solution, it was that they changed the business model in a way that made it very difficult for everybody else to compete. Because everybody else was assuming that hardware was going to be sold at close to cost, but the music was going to be sold at a nice profit margin. Right? And what Apple did was, they said the price of songs are going to be 99 cents. Well, the license cost from the studios from the labels is 80. If you take the burden cost of running the store, Apple makes no money on music. Well, think about that if you're one of the other companies. How do you compete with that? It's really difficult. Google is trying to do the same thing in the mobile operating system space. They're saying, well, instead of charging you a license fee, Mr. Handset Company, Samsung, Sony, HTC, I'm going to give it to you. But it comes with the strings that, you got to run my applications and I got to be the default search engine. Microsoft, could they go there? Yeah, but they wouldn't make nearly as much money, right? So it's a very, very challenging business model for other mobile software companies to compete with Google. So just think about how can you turn the tables on the competition and make it hard for them to respond. All right, raising money, always on the minds of entrepreneurs. I think the first thing to say is you just got to look at what are the actual capital needs of your application and what potential does it have. There's nothing wrong with the thing you're doing being a side activity for a couple people, and maybe it makes, $100,000 for each of the principals for a couple years. That's great. If it makes $1 million, if it's a huge hit, even better. Nothing wrong with that. Secondly, a lot of mobile things are a complement to a web business. Okay? It's not a standalone business. It exists in conjunction with a web business, and in fact, mobile is secondary. You better not be launching a mobile business where mobile is secondary. Okay? Now, if you have to raise outside equity money, those are 4 choices that are typically in degree of difficulty order. So friends and family. I've raised money from friends and family. Many entrepreneurs in the room probably have. It's the first place you go. It does tend to get tapped out after a while. Depending on how rich your friends and family are, maybe you can get tens of thousands, maybe you can get hundreds of thousands. Then there are angels, and I would say that community in many markets, and I know, Bob and his team here, for example, have been in a number of financings that are repeat angels. So they're professional angels. They invest in startups, and maybe they provide 50, 100,000. I mean, if there's 5 of them banding together, maybe they can put $500,000 in, or maybe even more. It does tend to typically top out at $1 million too. So, venture financing typically starts these days at $250,000 to $500,000 from some of the smaller funds that are willing to seed deals. A real venture financing is usually at least $1 million to $2 million, and for some of the larger funds, they won't touch it unless it's 5 to 10. So you got to be really thinking about that when you approach a venture company. Lastly, and something that's often ignored, you can try to get money from strategic partners. These are partners that might help you in distribution, might be an end customer. The main challenge is that if you try to get money from them early in your life, they typically want something more for their money than just a piece of your company. And it'll often create limits on decisions you can make later. Maybe you've mortgaged your future to them or limited yourself from pursuing sales to competitors, et cetera. But from a venture perspective, if your company doesn't have the potential to return $100 million, and I don't mean be sold for $100 million, I mean return $100 million to the outside investors, if it doesn't have that potential, I don't mean that it's likely, but it has to have that potential, most VCs are going to say, because we know that 60, 70% of our companies die. So the ones that work have to do that in order to make up for it. If they don't do that, math doesn't work. So you got to paint a picture of how that's possible. And if you can't create that picture in your mind, don't bother raising venture money. I listed a few key questions here. I'm happy to chat with those of you that are interested later, but these are, I think, the key questions. And the last one, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but because things are so capital efficient now, VCs who used to fund just a pitch. I mean, the venture industry until very recently was about a couple entrepreneurs, hopefully serial entrepreneurs, hopefully somebody that you know or referred by people that you know would come in and tell you about their idea, and you'd sit there and go, yeah, seems like a credible team, seems like a good idea. I'll make a few phone calls, and maybe I'll give them money. Okay. Well, now, because we all know that you can put the product in the market for $100,000, we're telling you, you can find $100,000 from somebody else, and then come show us your results. Because until that, you're one of 50,000 people that might have this idea. So don't expect to raise venture money, at least not for a software or mobile applications company, without some early results. This is a chart that we actually used in our fundraising for Metric, and this just illustrates, the way if you think about a traditional venture-backed company, it would be $20, $30 million in. When I was an investor in Indigo, it was at least $20 million invested, if you include all the equipment and stuff that came from the strategic, before you could even ship a product. That's not unusual. That's just the way it is. Well, you know, it's a little late to back out once you've already got 20 million in, so everybody just keeps going, and then it takes 50 or 75 or however much to get to cash flow positive. It's wonderful these companies can get to cash flow positive on less money. 10, 15 million is not unusual. But what we really like is that you can generate first customer results, first metrics on trivial amounts of money. And so that's why we want to see those first metrics. All right, summary. Finally, after 10 years of hype, mobile is finally a great entrepreneurial opportunity for all the reasons I've outlined. Although lots of people will tell you, oh, there's billions of feature phones in the world, and don't limit yourself to the iPhone and Android. Wisely, I think all the companies on the panel here haven't heeded those suggestions, and you shouldn't either. This is where the market is going. This is where there's greatest opportunity, and the usage intensity is 10x that. So an iPhone counts for a lot more than another phone. Get to the minimum product as soon as you can. Construct your application, your service, such that you can get data immediately about everything that's happening, every user download. Same for all your marketing programs. And then iterate. Make sure you have something that's mobile specific, because otherwise, I think you're probably going to lose out to some internet company that just does a line extension of their existing product. Think carefully about how to erect and maintain entry barriers. Hope the FCC is not here, but and you should deploy across multiple platforms using both applications and browsers. I'd be very careful with viewing hardware as more than an enabler. There will be a few exceptions to that, but I think the best thing for you to think about is it can be a very profitable enabler in the early going as you're enabling the ecosystem, but you need to think about what happens when it gets commoditized, and then how you make money then. And lastly, the fundraising strategy should be driven by your business plan, not the other way around. That's it. I think I'll pass the baton here. Jacques, do you want to do that? Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good. Good.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. You mentioned with one of the business models, the 4 business models that you were outlining, that a good thing to do is to create a place where there's content or there's value, and then outsource the advertising placement. Are there specific companies that actually provide that advertising serving right now for mobile applications?
Absolutely. So I mentioned AdMob. AdMob is for those of you who didn't follow it, in the process of being sold to Google for $750 million. If the FCC approves that'll go through in the next couple of months. There are other companies that do text and banner ads, which is the primary focus of AdMob. Quattro Wireless, Millennial Media, 2 other companies. You can look them up on the internet. If you want to do richer media advertising, video advertising, the market leader in that is a company called Rhythm New Media, which also happens to be one of my investments. So please buy your video ads from them.
All right, thank you. We're going to be doing a question and answer at the end of all the presentations, so please hold on to your questions for that. Our next presentation comes from a local marketing and media agency called SB Click, which specializes in delivering news, media, events, deals, basically relevant information based on someone's geographical, physical location. Melissa Tierney and Hunter Hillegas will co-present. They're both principals at SB Click. Melissa Tierney's background is in business administration, German literature, marketing. She's been a passionate business developer at SB Click since its inception. Hunter is a UCSB grad, a Santa Barbara native, a very experienced web applications developer for over 10 years now. Hunter's background and his work has served Grammy Award-winning artists, independent software companies. You can find his work when you go to Las Vegas. And he also serves a lot of local mom and pops in the area. So please join me in first welcoming Melissa Tierney and then later Hunter Hillegas.
Thank you, Jacques. Hi, I'm Melissa Tierney. Hi. Very happy to be here, very excited. First, want to thank the MIT Enterprise Forum for having us. We are honored to be here. And secondly, I'd like to also announce we are so excited here at SB Click. We have just released the second version of our iPhone application, and it is totally redone. So many more great features. It is just awesome what we have gone through to get to this point. So, without further ado, I'd like to start. SB Click is a hyper-local marketing community platform. We deliver news, events, deals, and media to people based on their lifestyle and physical geographical location. Simply said, GPS-based marketing and content. Who is our target market? Smartphones, BlackBerry, Droid, iPhone. Smartphones are being increasingly used by everyone in the marketplace. We've already touched a little bit on that. But in an affluent place like Santa Barbara as well, the usage of smartphones is very high as well. So here are some facts to start us off. Google right now has the market share, but Apple is slowly getting up there, as well as Droid. A day in the life. In our opinions, smartphones are becoming increasingly personal. Who here uses a phone, and be honest, who here uses their phone as an alarm clock? All right. How many of you use your phone to take pictures? And do you email them on the spot? Yeah, I do too. The point is, we are slowly integrating the use of smartphones into our personal lives. Not only can we do these things that we just mentioned, but we can also check our stock portfolios. We can also monitor our social lives with Facebook and Twitter. We can check our email. And later on today, we're going to find out how we can integrate our fitness regime into our phones. Why should we be marketing on mobile devices? What's the point? Some people look at me like I'm crazy when I show them what we're doing. The thing is because smartphones are so personalized, people consistently keep them on their persona at all times. They need them for something. When there comes a problem, what do? They whip out their phone, Google it. Where do I go? What do I do to solve this problem? People are consistently on their phones, using their phones. And if you market to people on their phones, you are getting direct results in real time to your target market. The fact that these phones provide access to unlimited information, and also certain applications, they help solve problems and cure a pain at the moment. If you don't know where to go to eat, bring out your SB Click app. It'll tell you half-priced entree around the corner from you. Problem solved. People want local content, and that is our focus at SB Click. We take this personalized application, this phone, and we integrate local content into it, geo-physical location in the community. And that is what we call hyper-local marketing, and that is what we do. We are doing that by integrating local content into our iPhone application. First is with local news, brought to you by Santa Barbara Independent. Local videos, brought to you by Santa Barbara Channels. Local real estate listings in Santa Barbara, brought to you by Santa Barbara Magazine. Local images of Santa Barbara, provided to you by Flickr. And last but certainly not least, local deals provided by local Santa Barbara restaurants. Moby Dick's, Cafe Shell, Pacific Crepes. We've got Stearns Wharf, State Street, and State Street. These are just a few of our many merchants that are working with us and trust us to deliver their content to our users. This right here is a book cover. It's actually the premise of SB Click. And what we do is we focus on our users so that they feel like they're at the center of the universe. And the way that we do that is we have users who have content on their phones from SB Click. And based on their location, content moves around them. So if you're on Upper State Street and you're looking at the content on your SB Click application, the content is centered around you and your location. But if you go down to Lower State Street, the content completely changes because it is relevant to your geographical location. SB-Click is very sensitive to those people who do not have an iPhone. Let's face it, we saw the stats. Apple only has about 25% of the market. So we have created ways to extend our services to people who don't have the smartphones. We also have a comprehensive website that showcases local content as well. And anybody can log in and have a text message sent to their phones so that they don't have to do any sort of printing, nothing. They can also do it via email, have a deal or a news article emailed to them. We also consistently update our social media, our Facebook and our Twitter. Anybody who is a fan of us or follows us can consistently keep up with us. This is our home screen on our iPhone application, where we have taken the Santa Barbara community and put it at your fingertips. Here we have local news, real estate listings, deals based on your physical location. We have a section for dining, a marketplace that you can search through. We have local blogs, local media. Like, again, it's Santa Barbara in the palm of your hand. This is our deal page. Right here at the time and the location that the screenshot was taken, the iPhone application is telling our user, hey, you can enjoy a half-priced entree at Crush Cafe. Well, let's say after I enjoy my half-priced entree at Crush Cafe, I want to get a massage. So I can go here into the Wellness tab, and I can see which massage parlors are having a good deal around the corner from me. Here's our deals page. It starts at the top with the one closest to you, which is Crush Cafe, and then Cafe Buenos Aires. And it goes down to Cafe Shell, Aldo's Italian restaurant. This is what we believe in. This is what makes our business work. We have a very strong user base. We have over 1,000 users who are actively using SB-Click for a variety of things. Merchants recognize this. They recognize that the users are looking for local content, and through the exchange of content, which is relevant local content, we have SB-Click. Each of these elements is a key element in what makes SB-Click work. And when one of them lacks, the whole thing falls apart. But we haven't had that problem yet. Here's some testimonials to show our strong user base. Thanks for saving me 13 bucks on my lunch the other day. We have this man who's a subscriber and a merchant. I learned more about restaurants in Santa Barbara from browsing through SB-Click in a few minutes than I have living here for 2 years. SB-Click saved me 7 bucks on my dinner. Thank you, Mike. I was dubious at first, but now I'm starting to see traffic from SB-Click. Here we see all three of our elements in action. We have the local content, merchant providing it, and the user receiving it. All at the palm of your hand. Here's our real estate section. Local real estate listings in your hand. Here's some stats to date. 1,012 iPhone application downloads. 1,089 registered users on the website. And I hate to tell you this, but this is inaccurate because it's consistently increasing. Without a good team, we wouldn't be where we are today. These are just some of the few people that have made this happen. We at SB-Click are consistently looking for high-quality people, great thinkers, open minds, open hearts, to help make our cause more widely known. That includes investors, that includes more strategic partnerships. We are always looking feel free to come and talk to me after the event. Right now, I'd like to have Hunter Hilligus come up and share more information and even do a demonstration. Hunter.
Thanks again, guys, for letting us do this here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about, finish out the presentation here, and then we're going to try an actual demo. So if the demo gods think well of us, hopefully that will go A-OK. Let's talk a little bit about challenges with regards to SB-Click. With regards to user adoption, anytime you're starting something new, you have to convince people to be interested in it. And we found that even though we were giving people the incentive of saving money, that wasn't enough to get them onto the app every day in there checking for new deals. So as part of our constant evolution in our development cycle, we added content through our partners, which Melissa was talking about, and we'll see in a moment. In regards to technology education, this is also something that's important, both for the users and for the merchants themselves. Merchants have many ways that they can spend their marketing dollars, and you have to convince them that mobile marketing matters. It's sort of a new thing for a lot of these merchants. They may not be technologically focused, so that is always a curve that you have to deal with. With regards to the smartphone market, we did talk about that it's growing, but still it's a very small sliver of the overall cell phone market. So you're limiting yourself in that way, but this is the right train to be on, I think. I mean, as Alan's excellent presentation showed us, these numbers are only getting bigger every single day. One of the bullets up there, features not being used. We are constantly iterating our software. And in the earlier versions of our software, we were we put the features out that we thought that users would want. And as we were watching them, trying to see how they were using the application, we discovered that some things weren't really getting the uptake that we had expected. So we had to retool certain things based on feedback, a normal part of the development cycle, but very, very important, and one of the key challenges that we had to meet as we've changed the application. Beyond that, the monetization of a business like this. So, again, we're starting with something that's a little bit new that merchants may not be that accustomed to. And so trying to find the right price points for these services across the deals, the real estate, all the different services that we offer. And to be honest, this is an ongoing thing. We're still trying to find exactly what the right levels are and make sure that we're offering a great value to merchants, that they're getting everything that they expect back. Multiple platforms. Now, this was something that was highlighted in Alan's talk. We started with the iPhone. It's been a great platform to start with. iPhone users tend to use applications a lot more than other smartphones. Even RIM has larger market share. iPhone users use more apps, and that seems to be consistently true. Android definitely catching up very quickly. Very hot platform, but to pick one for a small company, picking which platform we were going to go with, the iPhone's been great, but definitely looking at expanding down the road. Competition with regards to national and local, and again, we can talk about merchants have a limited amount of money to spend on marketing, especially in this economy where they want every dollar to count. So this is a very important thing. Goes hand in hand with educating these merchants so that they understand exactly the value that they're getting out of SB-Click, and they can realize that they can hyper-target someone based on preferences, based on geography, stuff that they just can't do with other marketing mediums. So also, there's national competition. This is definitely a market that's heating up. Santa Barbara is an interesting community in that it seems to, in many cases, favor homegrown businesses. Instead of going from the top down, grow from the small and to get larger. So we're hoping that will pay off for us. Definitely a philosophy that we are trying to embrace. With regards to market penetration limited by certain phones, again, it's a somewhat fragmented market now, but that's just the reality of it, and it's growing very quickly. So we're trying to position ourselves so that we're able to ride that train. Okay, so we're talking a little bit about what's the future for SB-Click. So SB-Click does stand for Santa Barbara Click, but it also stands for Send by Click. And the plan is to look for similar communities that are in some ways kind of have that same spirit or ethos that you see in Santa Barbara. So a few are listed there: Austin, Boulder, Ann Arbor. And to take this concept and move it into those other cities. Again, in each of these places and also in Santa Barbara, development of core content partnerships. We have great relationship with The Independent, with SP Channels, with Santa Barbara Magazine. We want to expand that and do more of that and give people a reason to spend more and more time with SP Click. And we want to make everything geographical, expand this down to everywhere that it makes sense. Right now, the geographical features are very focused on the deals aspect, but mapping and geo and GPS are great applications for stuff like real estate, video, and even kind of where social networking meets GPS features. Listening to the community. We have constantly been trying to keep our ears open and making sure that we are listening to our users, giving them tools and technology that are helpful for them, and that's a core part of who we are and what we expect to do in the future. Here is our mission statement. We began as locals in love with Santa Barbara, each willing to take a risk in developing a business we felt strongly would produce a product we ourselves would want. It's an exercise in humility and entrepreneurship. As someone that loves to build software, I think you always do best when you try and scratch your own itch. You build something that you would want to do. You end up with a product that is true to yourself and that hopefully other people will want. So now we're going to attempt to do a demo here. We've got a little special camera, and we're going to hopefully this will work. So we're going to start off by looking at the deals section, which is over here. I'm just going to tap on this, and you'll see here that the closest deal is listed at the very top. We use GPS to determine who's nearest by, and we also have deals grouped into categories. So let's say that I'm interested in having dinner after this, and I'm interested in some seafood. So I'm going to pick this Moby Dick deal here, and I can see that the data from their coupon is listed there. And you can't see everything on the screen, but there's some additional information there. So I could make this decision. I could say, hey, that sounds good, but maybe I want to shop around a little bit. Maybe I want to see what else is out there. So instead of just picking what might be the closest, I'm going to zoom into the restaurants category here. And you can see that there is a wide variety of deals from merchants, and these are all listed by their proximity in a large variety of categories. Let's assume that, let's say that I want to search for a specific kind of food. I'm interested in the deals, but I know that I really want Italian food. So I can go directly into the dining section, and I can locate the right category here. I'm going to pick Italian. And then here you see a list. This is more like a traditional listing of merchants in the area, alphabetically listed. You can see some have deals and some do not. We like to highlight the merchants that have deals and put that right up front and center. You can also see in some cases some additional information about the cost of some of these places. So let's say that I want to pick, let's try Emilio's. So I can drill in here and I can see some details on the restaurant itself. In this case, there's a little bit more information. We can bring up their menu here. This is actually going out to the web, so it might take a quick second. But let's say that I want to browse their menu. Okay, see, I've got their menu right up on the screen here. I can browse through, see if that looks like it's going to be a good choice for tonight. I can go ahead and just tap and dial from here. I can look at the map and see where they relate to other folks. And I can see that they do have a current deal. So anytime a merchant has a deal, it's wired in directly, and I can see that the details of that deal right there. So that's a very quick overview of how the merchant and deal systems work. But let's talk about real estate. And let's say that you are out on Sunday and you want to see see what's going on in the market. You want to drive around and look at a couple open houses. So if I go in here into our real estate section, I can see some listings here, and this is one of our great content partnerships. They're listed here, and I can just say, let's pick one. I'm going to pick this Hope Ranch Beauty here, and I can see there's some details. 3.295 sounds a little bit pricey, so I'm going to hit Show on Map, and I'm going to get an idea of what might be available in the area here as the map loads in. You'll see, okay, well, let's scroll around a little bit and see if I can find another one. There's some other listings in here. But if I'm out driving around, this is a really convenient way for me to go from listing to listing to easily make the best use of my day. Beyond real estate, there's some other important content partnerships. So people love to whip out their iPhone or their mobile device when they're waiting in line at the car wash just to read a little bit of news or read a local blog. So if our news section is powered by The Independent, and here you'll see their most recent headlines here, and I could read any one of these stories without having to fumble through the browser. They're brought right directly to you with the greatest of ease. But in addition to news, blogs in many communities are sort of the heart of what the normal people are thinking. So we wanted to bring that in, and we've brought a bunch of great local blogs that are incorporated into our blog section. You can easily read those headlines as well, and we're always looking to expand that with great new content. Beyond written content, multimedia is also quite a lot of fun. So if I go into our media section, you can see we've got photos here, and we use Flickr to grab great photos from Santa Barbara and from our partners. If I want to, say, go into one of these photo galleries, wait for this to load up here for a second. And, I can just pick a photo and view it and check out all this. And so this is a great way to waste a few minutes when you're in line. Great photo there. Great choice. Beyond photos, we also do video, and that's an area that we're trying to rapidly expand. If we flip over to our video tab here, you'll see that there's quite a listing. We've got content from the film festival. Let's load the mission one. So I'm going to play one right here. It's probably not going to look quite right on the screen, but the video download off the web, be displayed right on your mobile device. Again, it's another great way to waste a few minutes if you're in line and just need to kill a few. So I think the color's a little bit washed out, but I think you get the idea. Quit that. In addition to that, we also let you choose favorites. There's so much content in the app, it's important to make navigation a little bit easier if you've got your 3 or 4 or 5 favorite restaurants or whatever they may be. You want quick access. It's a great way to bookmark those kinds of things. And we also allow, you can't see it here on the screen, but we have account customization. You can create an account on our website, set up your preferences, and that will impact the deals that you receive. So you can, for instance, say that you like restaurants but don't care about auto parts. Then you will then get restaurant deals but not auto part deals. So the app will work just fine without any kind of customization, but if you do want to go spend that extra 5 minutes and customize it, that's an easy way to do it. That is SB Click in a nutshell. So it's available on the App Store. I hope you will check it out.
Thank you very much, Melissa and Hunter. It's pretty cool stuff. I use it all the time. Phone Halo. Actually, the title of tonight's program, The Convergence of Mobile Devices with the Physical World, is Phone Halos. We borrowed it from Phone Halo tonight. And it originated at UCSB. A few engineers, Chris, Christian, and Tyler, who's not with us today, co-founded the company out of the TMP program, Technology Management Program. And they really had this vision to build software that runs on mobile devices that talks to the physical world. Their flagship product is called Phone Halo Protect, and it basically tracks all of your valuables to prevent misplacement and loss. Please join me in welcoming Chris Herbert.
Thank you, Jacques, and thank you, everyone, for inviting me out tonight. I'm really excited to talk to you all, this great group of losers. Yes, you're all losers. Jacques, loser. John, loser. Klaus, loser. And don't feel special, though. I'm a loser, too. Raise your hand if you have lost or even misplaced one of these items. Maybe it was the keys you couldn't find before your meeting. Maybe it was that phone you left behind after you went to work and you had no calendar for your day. Yeah, we lose and misplace all these items, and there's no solution. And the cost is utterly high. And it's not just the cost of replacing this item or the data inside, but for this group here, it's the time is the time you spend searching for this item, the time you go without the item, and the time you spend replacing this item. That's time that we don't have. What we do is we use mobile applications fused with wireless technology to prevent loss and misplacement from ever happening again. Do you want to see how we do it? Yeah. This is where you all are supposed to say, yeah. That's good. Great. Well, it's really simple. We have software that runs on an iPhone, BlackBerry, or Android device. Software connects to a small device that's attached to your keys, purse, computer bag, whatever you want. Software tracks the distance between the keys and the phone such that when the two become separated beyond a user-defined distance, they both ring and alert you that you're about to lose either one. It's a preventative solution to loss. And let's show it to you right now. So this BlackBerry here is connected up to my keys and is tracking them. Let's wait for it to get connected. And there we go. So let's say I'm late for a meeting and I'm in a rush. Well, I need to go, grab my keys, and I walk away. The app on the phone is tracking my keys, such that when I become separated beyond a user-defined distance, it will cause both my keys and the phone to ring. And it will alert me that I'm about to lose either item. And my magic trick. And it works. So instead of having to go throughout my day without my phone, it's right here with me. All my contacts, appointments, everything I need. We also have different form factors, such as a streamlined money clip version that you can attach to and replace your wallet with, maybe put on your Kindle, your business notebook that you use. It's just right here, streamlined, beautiful design. We also have an ability to go and track your children with a small wristband here. Not sort of the dorky leash that you attach to your kids, but more so at a crowded theme park when you go get, your lemonade and you just have this on your phone so you know Jimmy doesn't walk away when you have your back turned and distracted. We're rolling out with this in the summer. So it all began at UCSB about 2 years ago. Christian and myself came out with the idea. We're both engineers, and like many engineers in the past, we took to the lab. These are all pictures of us in our garage creating this idea, as Alan spoke, with a low budget. And we got some recognition along the way from UCSB and as the most investable concept. Christian is a manufacturing engineer from Tyco Electronics, and he joined me after we graduated from UCSB last June. We are fortunate to have a backing by advisors who have a direct experience in the consumer electronics industry, and as well as a team of investors. So who's the target market? This should be obvious. It's smartphone owners. And the smartphone market is huge, and it's growing. Over 170 million smartphones were sold last year. But within this huge market, we found that smartphone owners use their smartphones for business. And when you lose a business phone, there's a real pain point there. It goes beyond just the loss. It's the data exposure you might have for that phone, and it's the productivity that you lose. As you can see, we're targeting the trendy of Android, BlackBerry, and iPhone. This gives us 75% of the current US smartphone market. With any great idea, there's plenty of competition, and it's really divided into two different forms. There's post-loss, such as phone insurance, Apple's Mobile Me GPS locator device, and location devices that help you find your keys if you can't, and other items. We want to be pre-loss, preemptive, a vaccine There's two other startups who are experimenting with this. Blue Neo, who is based in the UK. They have a similar setup, but their technology quite isn't there, and they're focused on the UK and European market. Zom is based in Oklahoma, and it's a Bluetooth headset that attaches to your keys, and when you become separated from your phone, the headset rings. It's a one-way protection. And as you can see from all the X's in our column, we're a lot better than them. But just not that, but it's the software. I just showed you the first aspect of our software, which is protect, but we actually have 4 different functions that we can do. There's protect, find, you can find your stuff in the morning, all software, and you can even locate your items through GPS, all through the software. This is a picture of Christian at the Consumer Electronics Show. We went there in January and had a great show, made a lot of connections with distributors, and even got featured in the Wall Street Journal. Christian had a great quote there about what we want to do. It's a real honor. So what have we done? Well, we have a live product, and we were featured in the Wall Street Journal. We have a leadership team that is backed by a board of advisors with direct experience in entrepreneurship and in the industry. We have 2 patents pending, and we've won some awards along the way, and as well as formed relationships with distributors and partners. And this, Jacques, you could hit that for me?
You, me, and most Americans have a problem misplacing common items. Often, these items cost hundreds of dollars and hours of precious time to replace. In 2010, 1 in 5 Americans will permanently lose their phone. 1 in 10 will lose their wallet. 1 in 4 will lose their keys. Introducing Phone Halo Protect, a simple system to protect important items. Tag your keys, wallet, purse, or other item with a Phone Halo Protect sensor. Download the Phone Halo app onto your phone, and whenever your phone and your valuables part ways, you're notified. It's that simple. Take Steve, for example. Today he's late for work. In a hurry, Steve leaves his phone behind, but brings his keys and wallet. The Phone Halo app running on Steve's phone detects the keys and wallet heading out the door and notifies Steve that he's about to forget his phone. If you're unable to hear the alert, the system will make sure your items are protected. Phone Halo Protect will even contact your friends and family to let them know you've lost your valuables. How's that for protection? Phone Halo Protect. Keep your stuff.
You see here that what kind of market share that we want to gain, and we keep our margins at 30% for this product moving forward. We're currently raising a Series A of $1.5 million, and we want to dump all of that money into the manufacturing of the product to scale out quickly. You can see here as our EBIT is increasing as our cost of goods decreases. We're sinking $1.5 million, so if you happen to be an accredited investor who is also a loser, be happy to talk to you afterwards. So visit phonehalo.com. We launch next week, and keep your stuff.
Very cool stuff. I lose all those things all the time, so I guess I am a loser. All right, our next presenter is Michael Williams. Michael graduated from UCSB with a BA in economics, earned his CPA while at KPMG in Newport Beach, his MBA from UC Irvine's fully employed MBA program, and then spent most of his career working in the wireless industry. Now, the real thing about Michael is that he worked on his own self, losing 50 pounds, which is very tough to do. And in that process, he learned a thing or two about fitness metrics and health metrics, and designed a suite of iPhone applications designed to track and manage exercise metrics and fitness management that talks to the cloud. So he's going to share some of that with us today. Please join me in welcoming Michael Williams.
Thank you, Jacques. Hi, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to present here. My name is Michael Williams, founder of ITMP Technology, and I actually Googled Convergence to find an image for Convergence, found this little Convergence wheel. Just so happened it had just enough number of spokes to talk about all the things that we're converging. We have, and I'm not sure what happened to the graphics here, but at the top you have a heart rate monitor, then a running watch, a bike computer, a weight scale, a pedometer, a display on a piece of gym equipment, a blood pressure cuff, and a glucose meter. And what we're doing is we're taking all that, all those different standalone devices and converging them into the iPhone. So our targeted users, just in the US alone, there are millions of people who exercise, walking, running, cycling, go to the health clubs. And there's hundreds of millions of people who need to be exercising and who aren't. Globally, if you look at Apple, there's 125 million accounts with iTunes, offering really the most user-friendly online purchase out there. And one of our strategic partners, one of our investors, is Spinning, and they have a global reach. Over 200,000 spin-certified instructors in 80 countries with more than 1 million people spinning every day. So our business premise is that some reasonable percentage of these people will want to capture their fitness and health data, if and only if it's completely automatic, and I mean no manual steps or processes, no cables, PCs, USB devices. It just has to happen auto-magically, and that's what we do. And when I did lose the 50 pounds and got off all kinds of meds that I'm saving now $25,000 a year, together with my healthcare provider, the hardest part of that whole journey was the tracking of it. So I basically quit my day job to automate this for everybody. So the 2 out of 3 in the US who are overweight or obese have kind of a dashboard for a healthy lifestyle. So there are a lot of these sensors out there. We talk about convergence. AMP Plus makes an ultra-low power digital standard for health and fitness sensors. And you can kind of think of it like Bluetooth, except for you don't have to recharge it every night. Ultra-low power runs on coin cell batteries that last years. And these sensors transmit data to the iPhone via a hardware device, the DigiFit Connect wireless bridge that we invented. And it's truly a plug-and-play device. So as you can see, we have apps for virtually every mode of cardio exercise. And app names, I cardio, I biker, I runner, I spinner, I power, and we're coming out with iWave very, very soon. And you can see on the right, this is the bike computer. We're tracking miles per hour, beats per minute, cadence, RPMs, calories, and elapsed time. And because we work on a cloud-enabled device, the iPhone or the iPod Touch, and coming soon, the iPad, we can send that data to the cloud. We capture the data on our servers, and we can share it with the people that we and our customers want to share it with. Digifit.com is a real key part of our strategy. We track and maintain historical data and allow our users to track and analyze the trends individually or within their own social communities. And we'll be capturing unprecedented volumes of health and fitness data that we can aggregate and analyze. So again, we track all of your cardio activity regardless of the exercise modality, and we marry it to health data. And so we bring it all together now in one central repository. So next is a short video that kind of recaps what I've said in about 90 seconds.
If you need to get moving to get healthy through cardiovascular exercise, or if you're already into fitness and want to have a better way to track all your fitness and health data, we have a solution for you. At DigiFit, we have a way to bring it all together now in one place right on your iPhone, the DigiFit ecosystem. With iCardio, your iPhone doubles as a heart rate monitor. And with iSpinner, your iPhone becomes a spinning computer. And if you bike outdoors, iBiker lets your iPhone also double as a cycling computer. And with iPower, your cycling computer on the iPhone can even track watts. And as if that weren't enough, coming soon in 2010, iWalker uses your heart rate to give you a much better calorie number than an old school pedometer. And of course, iRunner is your running watch on the iPhone. And if you're into hiking, iHiker, well, there's even an app for that in the DigiFit ecosystem. The DigiFit ecosystem will also track your weight with iWeigh. And if you want to track your blood pressure and blood glucose, we are working on eye pressure and eye glucose as well. So whether you're talking about fitness computers or health computers, the DigiFit ecosystem is putting them all together now in one place right on your iPhone or iPod Touch. And now that you have it all in one single internet-enabled device, you can send it to anyone you want to share it with.
So there are lots of these fitness and health sensors out there. Some of them are proprietary, like the Nike Plus iPod and the Fitbit. Bodybug is another activity kind of monitor. But then there are tons of the non-proprietary interoperable ones, and those are the ones that we work with. Big brands like Adidas and Garmin. And there's really been convergence going on in this space for quite some time, as you'll see in the video that follows. But it's accelerating now because of the explosive growth of smartphones, and so that's what we're really excited about at DigiFit.
Whether you're talking about fitness tracking or health tracking, the DigiFit ecosystem is putting it all together now in one place right on your iPhone or iPod Touch. Heart rate monitors were invented decades ago when the only mobile computer was a digital watch, so fitness computers naturally took that form factor, as did cycling computers.
Back then, we carried our analog Walkman personal stereos and had rotary dial telephones.
But now we listen to digital music on our iPods and we communicate with our digital iPhones. Today, peace signs and smileys are still very cool, but you don't see cassette tapes and rotary phones anymore. At DigiFit, we decided that it was time for a digital revolution in health and fitness tracking, bringing them all together now on the iPhone and iPod Touch. We chose Ant Plus because they are the leader in digital wireless fitness and health, and we aren't alone. Lots of leading brands have adopted Ant Plus, and whenever you see an Ant Plus logo, you know we're interoperable. Simply put, we all play nice in the Ant Plus sandbox. Garmin, Spinning, Adidas, Trek, Star Trek, Nautilus, and DigiFit, just to name a few. Our DigiFit Connect wireless bridge helps connect the dots between health and fitness. Depending on which fitness or health DigiFit apps you use, you will also need Ant Plus enabled devices that talk to the iPhone through our DigiFit Connect wireless bridge. There are Ant Plus interoperable heart rate monitors, cycling sensors, foot pods, and coming soon, weight scales. And by the way, the DigiFit all-digital health and fitness revolution is just getting started.
So in terms of going to market, we actually became the first heart rate monitor and bike computer that wasn't GPS-based on the iPhone on February 6th of 2009, and pretty much did a one-year beta with a different type of hardware that basically got the data into the iPhone via Wi-Fi. We launched the DigiFit ecosystem at the end of February, a soft launch without any promotion or marketing. And we're rolling it out to our partner stores, Spinning and Newly Fitness, two real big leaders in the fitness industry right now. And right now we're in the US and Canada, but we'll be moving into Europe and beyond. And we're just in preliminary talks of trying to get into the Apple online store, and we hope to be there sometime mid-year and possibly in the Apple retail stores by the end of the year. But again, we're just in preliminary conversations right now. Here's some pricing examples for our apps. Our apps are subscription-based, and with the 2-year option, you get 6 months free. And our sensors are competitively priced. Hardware bundles, here are some examples. iCardio and iBiker are the ones that we're targeting to try to get into the Apple online store. iSpinner bundle will be in the spinning.com store. Actually, it's in there already now. And iRunner will be reserved for digifit.com along with individual sensors. So if we're just looking at Apple mobiles, and I say Apple mobiles, I mean the iPhone, the iPod Touch, and the iPad. We're shooting for 2.3 million users by the end of 5 years, and if we get there, we'll have a revenue run rate of 130 million annually. As you see, our software business has very high margins, but the hardware business is more sensitive to channel costs. AMP Plus is in, by virtue of our hardware device, that enables AMP Plus to be in the iPhone, iPod, and coming soon the iPad. But by the end of 2010, we expect AMP Plus to be in a lot of different other platforms like Android and RIM and Windows Mobile. So we're when AMP Plus shows up in these devices, we'll port our apps over and be device agnostic. Really excited to share that next Monday I'll be going to CTIA, the big Cellular Telephone Industry Association. We were one of the 3 finalists for the Mobile App Challenge. So we'll be demoing our apps to a live audience, and they'll select a winner, kind of a smartphone American Idol. And you know, we're guaranteed the bronze, so we're really excited about that. So just in summary, we're in a very exciting market, and we're the first to have an easy-to-use integrated platform. Apple's been just terrific to work for, and we've partnered with major leaders in the fitness industry and have more partnerships in the works. We've been getting great reviews and are finalists in the Mobile App Challenge, as I just mentioned. And we're starting with the Apple mobiles, but we'll be hardware agnostic. We have a subscription revenue model for our apps, and we sell sensors, both major brands and plan to private label as well. And in the future, when we scale, we may have other revenue models. So with that, again, the digital health and fitness revolution is just beginning, and I thank you for the opportunity to present.
Any questions out there? Yes, sir. Still.
Hi, I'm John Walker from Appfolio. I guess this is more a techie question, but about 8 years ago, I think I was at CTIA, and there were about 50% of the vendors were these cross-platform development environments. And I noticed most everyone up here is developing for the iPhone, but obviously it'd be much more desirable to be able to reach all the devices at once. What's kind of the future of development across the platforms? Is that really even going to happen, or do you now just develop for the individual platforms as that makes sense for your market?
I definitely have an opinion on that. I think right now the native SDKs for each platform provide the best opportunity for each device. They give the deepest device integration. Generally speaking, you can access more features. The web application and browser arena on these devices is getting better and better with mobile Safari on iPhone and Google's browser on Android. You can even access geolocation data through the browser using JavaScript. So those are getting better and better. You'll see more opportunities for cross-platform stuff. But I think at the moment, the best applications are going to be native on each platform, respecting the nuances of each device and understanding that the devices are at least subtly different and work in subtly different ways, and designing to those instead of trying to go for something that's a little bit more cross-platform right now. I think those applications are going to end up working better and looking better.
Alan, anything to add?
I completely agree.
Cool.
Yeah, I've actually been going to CTIA since 1996, and I think that year was the year of Convergence, and it really hadn't happened until the iPhone came out. Because Apple started with a really good computer and then put a phone in it, whereas previous to that, we've had smartphones for over a decade, but we had handset manufacturers trying to cram a computer into a phone. And so I think you know, a couple years ago, it was an apples to oranges comparison, and Apple really was the smartphone that kicked off all this energy in smartphones. And the others will catch up. We believe that RIM and Android are the two big players to port apps over to and plan to.
Samsung and Nokia just announced, or no, Samsung and Symbian announced that they'll be kind of standardizing their SDKs so that developers will be able to develop for single APIs across multiple platforms. So that was announced at the World Wireless Conference in February. So there is some of that movement in the market, but I don't think it's going to gain traction for a little while, at least another year or two.
That's Christian Smith, co-founder of Phone Halo. We didn't introduce him. He's got a pretty successful engineering background, and probably I think the most interesting thing is that he was full-time manufacturing engineer at Tyco, and he quit in this economic climate to pursue Phone Halo full-time. So welcome, Christian Smith. Other questions in the audience?
I'm just curious about the age segmentation that you see with phone usage. We hear a lot about like the net generation, typically being the early adopters. How are you seeing baby boomers and people who probably are less over 30 using phones?
I can take that. I think that if you look at who is over-indexed for smartphones, so to speak, more than their proportion in the population, the top two groups would be 18 to 29 and 29 to 44. For two reasons, right? One is they're probably the most voracious consumers of internet content, and these are internet-centric devices, and yet they are old enough to afford a smartphone subscription. That said, there are a lot of people older than that use web-connected smartphones. But I think it's trailing. You're trailing the broad demographic adoption of the wired internet. So certainly, if you're trying to reach 65 and older, I would focus on mobile first.
There's a follow-up question. Yes.
My grandmother uses cell phones, but the biggest, particularly with DigiFit, I've heard a lot of pushback with regard to the older generation using phones, but I don't think that will. I don't know how we can address that barrier without making it sound like a barrier, because I do think that if people need to use it, we can find a way to create that message.
Right, but I think that's the difference, right? In Kenya, that is the only way to communicate electronically, and so where there's when there's a need, people find a way, almost regardless of age. But for the older generation in the U.S., there hasn't been quite the same pressing need, and my limited experience with my own family, phone calls, yes, texting, not so much, mobile internet, no. And I think that's a relatively broad thing. I think that's just going to, when most of the people in this room reach the retirement age, it'll be second nature to do every internet action on your phone. But I think for the next 5 to 10 years, I think you will see significant drop-off, as you move up 50, certainly over 60, for data-type applications on phones.
I have a question for the whole panel. Is there any notion that there's too many apps on the phone and that'll dictate how many apps you launch on a daily basis and ultimately dictate the functionality and the extent of what you can do on an individual app?
Well, the usage statistics for different phones vary from phone to phone. So an Android user is likely to launch a game about 5 to 7 times a week, whereas an iPhone user is mostly concerned about news and media applications, which get launched between 3 and 4 times a week. So the type of application that people use varies from phone to phone.
And I guess connected to that, are there distribution models or pathways connected to these manufacturers and to the iPhone, the RIM community, the Android, that allows entrepreneurs to get their apps in there, knowing that the demographic dictates usage? Are there ways to get in through Apple?
Well, the App Store operates in many ways like a retail store in terms of how it's set up. Bigger companies are featured. Apple doesn't take money for those prime spots, but they feature things that the employees find that I think are exciting. We've got some feedback there, but as far as I know, it's kind of a combination of if you have a hot property, you're going to get featured. If you have an inside track, you can probably get featured.
Actually, it looks like a store, but it's not run like a store. Apple really doesn't care about their revenues from apps. It's trivial. Okay? What they care about is selling more iPhones. And so that's why they don't allow for placement based on who can bid more, which is, every inch of your supermarket is priced out. So the end cap near the cash register costs more than the end cap on the other side, and placement on certain shelves and eye height costs more than, it's highly optimized. That's not the way the iPhone store works, because Apple's objectives are not to maximize revenue in the store. Apple's objectives are to maximize the perceived value of the platform so they can sell more iPhones. And so it's true that some companies with big brands get featured, but they don't get featured because they're spending money. They get featured because it's Apple's belief, I think somewhat rationally, that having EA, Madden, or Discovery Channel, or Family Guy, or whatever it might be, featured prominently will cause more people to download, will cause them to value the platform more highly, and will then cause more people to buy iPhones or buy new iPhones. So when you're dealing with Apple, it's very important to keep in mind what their objectives are. They're not like Walmart or Amazon. That's not where they're coming from.
I'd also add that some developers are a little bit frustrated that Apple seems to try to sell apps just the same way they sold music. They had so much success with the iTunes Music Store. They basically shoehorned apps into that same framework. And so there are some specific features that developers want that they don't have. Like, for instance, with an iPhone application, you can't charge for an upgrade. There's no way to do that, except unless you want to release another app with the same name. Some things that are pretty standard in the software business, Apple doesn't support in the App Store. That's been getting better over time, but it's been a painfully slow process for some people that are selling stuff in the store.
That's right.
Jacques, I have a question for Alan. What you just said about the iTunes App Store, how does that relate when you talk about RIM and Android in terms of the other?
That's a good question. Android is a strange beast because it's fundamentally sort of automated and unregulated. And so, yeah, there's some prominence based on past sales or downloads, which determine your ranking, which then determines whether you're featured as a top seller and so on. But it's fundamentally pretty open. So it's very much sort of merit-based, if you will, ultimately, what bubbles to the top. And there's almost no editorial intervention like you see with Apple. The RIM App Store is, I think, operated more like the Apple App Store, much more tightly controlled, very much about featuring apps that RIM perceives will add to the perceived value of the platform. But they will certainly accommodate surprises, and they have every incentive to take an app that's unknown if it's proving to be really popular with the initial downloaders and then featuring it. My partner has a company that has had phenomenal results on the RIM App Store. The RIM App Store right now is still pretty primitive. It's not pre-installed on most of the BlackBerries that are in the field, and it's subject to all kinds of limitations with various operators on how prominently featured it is, or even if it's pre-installed. Verizon, for example, is insisting on launching their own App Store and featuring that over device-specific stores. So BlackBerry has this thing where they're trapped by their own previous friendly relationship with the operator community, and it's hampering their ability to have as robust a consumer experience as Apple has. So I think over time they'll clearly migrate towards where Apple is.
One interesting difference, Android and BlackBerry both actually, you don't even have to use an app store to install an application. Apple, of course, the only way to get an app on the iPhone unless you hack your iPhone is to go through the App Store. But Android supports direct downloads of applications. You could market it on your own website. So does RIM. What's interesting is that Microsoft, with their Windows Phone 7 series, I hope I got that name right, that's coming out at the end of the year, they're going with the Apple model. They're going to have their app store, and it's going to be the only way you can get software on their phone.
There's a question back here. Thank you, guys.
Does anyone know how many iPhone applications or smartphone applications have come out of the Santa Barbara area since the iPhone came out?
You mean applications that are focused on Santa Barbara? Or
no, just in general.
Companies that are out of Santa Barbara?
I can tell you just anecdotally from participating in the local developer community, it's not very large.
Yeah.
So I can't give you a number, but you could probably count them on multiple hands.
Yeah, I'd say under 10.
We've done close to 10 ourselves.
Well, I mean, but you mean one company,
right?
Yeah. You were talking about companies developing apps, or individual applications. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So 10 to 20, maybe. Other questions? Yes.
I hate it when people comment instead of asking a question, but I actually want to respond to something Alan said about, I think I'll call it mobile commerce, which is maybe too broad, but I predict, and I'm going on the record, that within 2 years, we will see people purchasing at locations, and I think this affects I think this affects a huge category of mobile applications and development. In Japan, you can hit your phone and get something out of a vending machine. You've paid for it through your phone company, I guess, your carrier. And I'm not following this whole area that closely, but it seems like I give it 2 years and we'll be doing it here. The barriers are probably something really scary, like what happened with, someone mentioned early days of some of these consumer electronics shows, but what happened with broadcast and digital broadcast. So not only do I predict in 2 years we'll start seeing click on your phone and buy in physical stores, but also there'll be an expose about why it didn't happen sooner a couple years later.
Can I just say something to that? I think it will happen at some point. I'm not as optimistic as you, though. And let me just explain why. If you look at mobile payment, so the payment method that you mentioned, which is the most convenient, which is sort of contactless, really requires an NFC, a near-field communication between your phone and the payment terminal, which is what they deployed in Japan. The most prominent one was developed by Sony. And that system requires sort of a top-down mobile market to embrace and deploy such a standard, which is what happened in Japan. It's a very top-down market. There's only 3 operators, and it's sort of a very planning-oriented society. I think if it hadn't been for that market structure, I'm not sure it would have been deployed in Japan. But the US is far less organized. More importantly, has other payment mechanisms where cost has been driven down to next to nothing. And it makes it very difficult for new payment methods that require new infrastructure to get deployed. You'll see it in some individual venues. You see it in gas stations with the mobile, OnePass stuff, and you see it at some sports venues and stuff with RFID paying. But it's very, very hard to beat credit and debit cards in the U.S. We just love our plastic. It's so cheap here to do that. And at the end of the day, it's hard to deploy new infrastructure to support what you're talking about. Where you are seeing mobile payments happening very quickly is in the developing world. In India, for example, but this is true in the Philippines, Thailand, lots of places, you're seeing very rapid and very aggressive pushing of electronic wallets in phones because guess what? There is no other electronic payment mechanism, and people use their phones as their only computer, and so you'll see a lot there.
Just to tack onto that, Alan, you mentioned when OS 3.0 came out, what's referred to as in-app purchase, or the ability to add levels to games. We're doing in-app purchase to upgrade your heart monitor to be a bike computer too, and that's only for virtual goods right now that Apple's doing it. But 125 million credit cards on file. In-app purchases is like room service. It doesn't even feel like you just put it on your account. And so I see actually m-commerce really coming as Apple starts looking at physical goods through apps. And that's something that can evolve pretty easily.
Let me just add one other thing to that. So the one to keep an eye on other than Apple, I think, is Amazon. I mean, if you think about who else has an instant purchase mechanism with the majority of U.S. households, they're the only ones, other than the mobile carriers who can't get out of their own way. So I think Amazon has a lot of potential in mobile. They have a very robust mobile app, and you'll see stuff. And by the way, people want to use their phone for shopping and payment. You're absolutely right. One of the logos that I showed in early parts of my presentation is for a company called ShopSavvy, which is basically using the camera in your phone to take a picture of the UPC barcode on any item. You do that, it hits the network, it pulls down all the web shopping results for that product and all the other merchants nearby based on GPS that have the same product and what the prices are. So it's in effect, you're standing at Target and they're offering, the product at $50, and suddenly Walmart's offering it at $30 on your phone, and you can single click to have it shipped to you, or you can go to that store and buy it. There's going to be a lot of that, and it's just going to make physical retail even more brutally competitive than it already is, but make it much more convenient for consumers.
What a great crowd. St. Patrick's Day, staying well after 8. Other questions? Well, I have a question. It's more of a prediction kind of question. Is it possible that these phones are going to replace laptops and desktops, and why do we need those?
Well, we see the entire buzz with the iPad lately, but basically it's a big iPod Touch, right? But really, this is the next step, which is taking this mobile device and doing a lot more, and maybe even doing some basic word processing. Once you get a good human interface device, which is one of the main keys of last Consumer Electronics Show, we're going to see a huge variety of applications and growth in replacing laptops.
Yeah, just to add to that, I remember when I first got into wireless, we were 15-20% penetrated, and people were saying that someday people would never even own a landline phone. They'd just have a wireless phone and that's it. And people thought they were crazy, and we're there. We've been there for a while now. The numbers that we're talking about up in the high 100s, 100 million for smartphone sales annually, are predicted by 2012 to be at 500 million. And there will be people who never get a computer because their smartphones do everything that they need, and including in developing countries.
I think part of it maybe is, instead of referring to them laptops and computers, think about form factors. Because for a lot of people, a mobile phone, no matter how powerful it is, the form factor is not right to replace their desktop computer. They want something bigger to watch movies, to write their novel, whatever. You may see devices like the iPad and their ilk replace laptops for some people, but I think for a lot of people, they're still going to want a larger form factor device to go along with their smartphone.
I think that's right. I would only observe that nothing says that this can't be the computer and something else the screen.
Right.
Right. So I think you already see that today. Several of these high-end phones have video and other RGB out. So you could theoretically hook up a large monitor to them, and then you're just a wireless keyboard away from what is effectively a Mac Mini that's just a lot smaller. Right. So you're gonna see that.
Question right here.
I would follow up on the comment about improving the human interface, because these smartphones have the most appalling human interfaces, and there's absolutely no chance for them to replace the desktop computers until people get to do something about that terrible human interface.
What specifically is disturbing about the interface?
Well, some of it is the physical limitation, and some of it is a whole lot more sophisticated than that. For instance, if you're walking down the street trying to read the screen and trying to point at the screen, are very difficult things to do. You would much prefer to speak to your handheld device and have it talk back to you. But if you're trying to compose text, then the situation is somewhat different. And part of the difficulty with that is part of the human brain, that the part of the human brain that composes sentences and the part of the brain that speak are in actual fact basically the same part of the brain. And so if you do dictation, you actually have to learn to do that. Now, the part of the brain that operates your fingers is a different part of the brain. You can compose a sentence and type at the same time using two different parts of the brain, and that is a whole lot easier to do. So you're probably going to need a big fat keyboard that's designed to connect to your fingers in order to do this well.
What kind of phone do you have?
Well, I have a very minimal and definitely non-smartphone gadget.
Okay.
This may be age-related.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Hunter, what was that app that we were messing around with that lets you talk everything out?
Well, there's a couple of apps that do that. So, voice synthesis and dictation are becoming more popular. Actually, Google added it to Android 2.1, which is what's shipping on the Nexus 1, directly in the operating system. And I think that text-to-speech and the opposite are going to become more and more pervasive. That's just a natural progression as the technology gets better. I mean, it's still pretty lousy. Even dictation technology that's 90% right, you don't want to have to correct 10%. That's still a lot. It's getting better.
My additional comment is about Apple's tagline that says one app at a time. And unfortunately, humans are complicated. The kinds of things that humans want to do often involve multiple applications. And unfortunately, the iPhone does a lousy job of connecting together multiple applications.
Okay. Yeah, so that was a point that I was asking earlier about how many apps will you really run in a day. That's really interesting. And I think that Alan referenced that in his presentation. He was talking about this interesting shift to the application world versus, I guess more of a, agnostic OS world. So, Alan, what do you think?
I'd say a couple things. First of all, I think Apple's next software release is going to support running apps in the background. So I think you're seeing Apple moving in that direction. It is more difficult to multitask applications on one of these devices because of the physical limitations. All that said, I would challenge what you said. I actually don't think that's correct. I think if you were to do a consumer survey of iPhone users and desktop computer users, and you would ask them which is more intuitive, I'm pretty sure the iPhone would win. And I think the reason it would win is because of the very, very clever multi-touch implementation that they've done. I mean, the reason that iPhone won wasn't because they implemented, they had some new hardware components, but everybody else has copied that now. It's because they just did a fantastic job of rethinking the UI for touch control. I'm not an Apple fanboy. I carry an Android phone, but Apple's stuff is just better. It works whenever it is that what you most wanted to do. That's the default, as opposed to your 3 menu levels down. The other thing I would say is I think that what you will see next is extension of touch. So you'll see gesture control and so on. So we're just beginning in terms of UI. In terms of voice, all I can say is when I landed in Santa Barbara Airport earlier today, I brought my Android phone, and I brought the little suction cup thingy, mostly for convenience, put it up there, and I used this as my GPS device, and I never entered a word. And I went to 4 appointments today, basically saying I need to go to, such and such shopping center in Santa Barbara, and it took me there.
Google has been clever
pretty
by
good.
offloading a lot of that processing to the cloud, which is what enables them to get around some of the hardware limitations of this small device.
Well, I think we're going to wrap up. Please join me in thanking all the presenters one last time. And thanks to all of you for coming out on such a festive day and for staying so late. Thank you.